interesting man. Now, he did a perfect job. I never had a malfunction in any part of the armament. But he was from Brooklyn, the world's most accomplished griper. He complained and griped and bellyached about everything all the time. So one day he's under the wing of the airplane. Well, you can see where that gas tank is hanging there. That's where the pylon is to hang bombs on. He was under there working on that, and he had me up in the cockpit pulling the bomb release for him. And a fighter had landed, parked near our plane, and the pilot walked by. He's dressed in a sweaty old flying suit. He looked down, he said, "Corporal, how are things going?" Well, Stone didn't look up. He said, "Oh, they'd be all right, except there's some blankety blank damn big shot coming in. They've had us cleaning things up around here." That pilot said, "I didn't expect any special attention." And both Stone and I look out at 3-star General Elwood Quesada, commander of the 9th TAC, under whose command we flew. Well, what could Stone do? He jumped up and saluted. And the general returned his salute, but he made an issue of it. A very slow gesture like that. Locked his eyes on Stone, got his hand up to his goggles, slowly lowered his hand, leaned in at him, and then grinned and walked off. General Quesada was a good guy. He was sort of our hero. He's the guy that developed close support to the ground troops from the air. He got the radios and the frequencies in both the tanks and the airplane so we could talk to them, and they could lead us to targets that they wanted destroyed. And also we could attack stuff within 100 yards of them without fear of shooting our own people. General Quesada was a real visionary, and that technique is still in use today. Now, not yet. Those 3 guys were our heroes. We could bring an airplane back all shot full of holes, and by morning that thing was repaired and ready to go in first-class shape. And they weren't in a nice hangar. They're out in the boondocks with flashlights. They were absolutely heroic. They took great pride in their airplane, and the way they looked at it was they allowed me to fly it for them. Now the guy in the middle, Sergeant Jones, I walked up to the plane one day. He's up in the cockpit, and he had tied the tail down so it couldn't bounce and run that engine wide open, doing an engine shut. And I walked up just as he's shutting the engine down. So he climbed out of the airplane and he said, "You know, I wonder what that sounds like in the air." "Well, Jones, would you like to find out?" He said, "Sure." So we took the parachute and the cushion out of the airplane. He sat in the seat and I sat in his lap. We couldn't get the seatbelt around both of us, but I took off. Got up to 12,000 feet. I opened that throttle wide open to the stop. And there's a little lever to kick aside, and that goes to the next stop. That turns on the water injection, and you get 400 more horsepower. So you've got 2,400 horsepower screaming out there. And Jones let out a yell. Boy, his baby is really performing. And I dived the airplane and rolled it. Now, no seatbelt, remember. I'm sure you know, you do a slow roll, you're going to fall out or into the canopy. But a barrel roll, centrifugal force will keep you in the seat if you do it right. And obviously I did it right. I'm still here. He was the only one of my crew willing to try that, however. They were smarter than he was. The next picture is my second airplane. That is a D25 model. This is the D16, the Razorback. They were essentially the same airplane, except that bubble top gave you a lot better visibility than this greenhouse did. On the other hand, there's a little turbulence that formed behind that, a bit of a vacuum which slowed the airplane about 5 miles an hour. The Razorback model, the airflow was controlled. So this airplane was faster. That's prettier, this is faster. Tells you cosmetics are not everything. Other than that, they flew about the same. Now, I'm going to show you what that kind of flying did to a pilot. The next picture is me at age 21 in primary flight training in Uvalde, Texas, just learning to fly, flying a little Fairchild PT-19s. I'm going to divert just a minute and talk about Uvalde. A bunch of my classmates were New Yorkers, Manhattan, Queens, Yonkers. So we went in town one day to look around, and you can walk around Uvalde pretty quick. It's a small town. We came upon an old man sitting under a tree, and he had a wash tub full of pecans. He was shelling pecans. So we walked up and just started a conversation, and he was more interested in my friends than in me because of their New York accent. They clearly weren't Texans. About 15 minutes, got ready to leave. I stuck out my hand and said, "Sir, I've enjoyed visiting with you. My name's Charlie Mohrle." "Good to meet you, Charlie. My name's John Garner." And we recognized John Nance Garner, Vice President of the United States, sitting there shelling pecans. But he was born and raised in Uvalde, Texas, and that's why that's Garner State Park and Garner Field and Garner everything down there. Okay, it took 9 months to go through 3 phases of training. I'm in primary there. I went from there to Randolph Field, flying BT-9s. Probably nobody here ever heard of a BT-9. You've heard of BT-13s. I flew BT-9s at Randolph and went from there to Mohrle Field in Mission, Texas, down in the very southern tip of Texas for my advanced. And I got my wings and commission and was sent to Sarasota, Florida, where we learned to fly fighters, flying P-40s like the Flying Tigers flew. Finished that, I was assigned to the 405th Fighter Group, which was just being formed at Walterboro near Charleston, South Carolina. Excuse me. I was assigned to the 510th Squadron in that group. The next picture is a portrait like that they took of each of us. In that picture, I'm 22 years old and considered myself to be a hotshot fighter pilot. Now I'm going to divert just a minute. At the museum, it's an education system, and one day I'm telling this story, I had a bunch of grade school kids in there. There's a little girl right in the front, she's maybe 6 years old, and she kept looking from that picture back at my face, back and forth like that. She looked puzzled, held up her hand, and I said, "Yeah, what is it?" She said, "What happened?" That's just priceless. All right. I'm 22 years old in that picture. The next picture, I'm 22 years old in that one too, but look at the difference in the faces. I had just come back from a mission when that picture was taken. That's why I've got my flight gear on. The exhaustion and the weariness and the tension is pretty evident in that face. That was just after my 50th mission. At that point is when General Quesada was on our field, and we were bullshooting with him. And somebody said, "General," now we were 9th Air Force, "General, 8th Air Force pilots get to go home after 30, 35 missions. Most of us have already flown 50 missions. When are you going to let some of us go home?" The general looked at him and said, "Lieutenant, we're prepared to replace every airplane 3 times and every pilot twice." And that ended the conversation. But at least you understood where we were. He was there for other reasons. One was to tell us that we had been recommended for a presidential unit citation. That was for that Filet Gap action that I talked about earlier. It turns out we were the smallest unit to ever wipe out a whole army. And we, 36 P-47s, wiped that army out in less than 3 days. Pretty remarkable accomplishment. We were recommended and did get the presidential unit citation. Now, there's another picture that went with this. Apparently I misplaced it. Let's see if it...
No,
Okay, never
damage
mind.
assessments.
Never mind. My wingman got a medal. His name was Boleslaw Koshinski. Now that obviously was no Irishman. He was a good Polish kid from Buffalo, New York. Clean, decent, exceptionally fine pilot. And he got a medal, and General Quesada pinned the medal on his shirt and shook hands with him and said, "Congratulations, Lieutenant. Thank you, and God bless you." He started to step to the next one and looked back and said, "Lieutenant, how old are you?" "I'm 19, sir." The general nodded, started to step aside, and looked back again and said, "Does your mother know you're over here?" But he was shot down and killed 3 weeks later.